Is it Tuesday? Because the taco truck's out front. Hey guys, Rook here, welcome back to the bench, and today we're going to be doing a new project, and that is Project Taco Truck. This is our Rock Island Tac Ultra FS. This is a government-size 5-inch barrel, double stack, 1911 in 9mm, and this is going to be one of our new gamer guns. This gun comes in anywhere from about $700 to $900, which is a steal for what you're getting. A very flat shooting, smooth running gamer gun. To get into something like this on the high end, you're looking upwards of $3,000 to $4,000. So what's our goal with this? Our goal is to turn this into a competitive gun with those $3,000 to $4,000 guns. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to throw some parts at it. First up, we hooked up with Taylor Freelance. They got us some of these 140mm plus 4 base pads. We got 3 of these, 2 for the Rock Island mags and 1 for a surprise mag later on. We also got the Fattie Speedwell. This is a magwell that's going to replace our stock magwell here on the Tac Ultra. Next up, from Evolution Gunworks, we hooked up with them and they sent us this, the lightened hammer set. This should reduce and crispen up our trigger pull and make it competition ready. And lastly, Fusion Firearms helped us procure this guy. This is their flat face K trigger. What we're doing today is we're going to put those in this. So let's go ahead and get to it. First up, as always, let's make sure the firearm is free and clear, and let's go ahead and pull it down. So we're just going to sit this to the side. All of the work that we're doing today is in the lower half here. Next up, let's go ahead and see if we can get these grips off. Let's grab the appropriate Allen wrench and have at it. There's one side. Now these are para style grips, but these are not para ordnance grips. They've got this little thing to cover up that hole in the back. However, they are extremely deep just because of the double stack nature. Okay, so there, our grips are off. Next up, let's go ahead and remove this set screw. This is in the bottom of our magwell. That should just come up and out. And that set screw is just gonna sit that to the side. Next up, we need to go ahead and pull the mainspring housing with this pin. However, to do that, we need to make sure that the hammer is dropped. So go ahead and depress your grip safe. Make sure that you hold the hammer because we don't want that coming up and hitting the frame right here. Go ahead and pull the trigger. Drop the hammer. That's going to relieve the spring tension of our mainspring, allowing us to go ahead and push this pin out. I've had these pins both require and not require tapping out, so I just prep and go ahead and give it a tap out for now. Okay, and of course that punch wasn't long enough. Let's go ahead and grab this one. There we go. Okay, so there's our pin. Sit that to the side. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hold my thumb over my magwell because that mainspring housing, depending on how tight or loose it is, might try to push that out. So I'm going to hold everything together. Go ahead and pull my pin out. I can already feel the mainspring housing pushing down on it. So I'm going to go ahead and there's my magwell. Let's go ahead and slide out our mainspring housing. And that's going to release all of our stuff. Now we got a mainspring in here. We are going to have to replace this mainspring, so that's going to be tons of fun. Set that to the side, and then we've got our leaf spring up in here. Set that to the side, and that's it for that portion of it. So next up, we're up to the safety. So in order to remove the safety, what we need to do, we've got a we need the hammer back, which if you're like me, it probably has already fallen back. And then the safety's got 2 different positions. It's got on and it's got off. So that's safe and that's fire. So what we need to do is we need to kind of get it in an in-between state here. And what I do is I grab a pretty small little flathead screwdriver and we want it in between fire and safe, and we need to just apply a little bit of pressure on the back end of this while we kind of wiggle it around and get it to pull out, and it should start separating just a little bit from the other side. Now this particular one is a new gun, so odds are this is going to be a pain in the butt to take apart. There we go. And there you can see we've just started separating it. You can see that I can get my screwdriver in there now. And then it pops right out. You can see there that it's popped out. I'm going to go ahead and pull it out. Making sure that I go kind of slow. So you can see here are the 2 pins that work on it. Go ahead and set that to the side. Now we do have a detent here, and I'm going to go ahead and pull that detent out because we are doing enough here that I don't want that coming out while we're working. Go ahead and see if I can get that all out in one piece. There we go. So that is a double-sided detent. We got a small side and a big side. Big side goes towards the back. Let's go ahead and set that to the side. And then on the other side of the gun, you can see here we've got this is our right side safety. We got a pin right here that's actually retaining that safety. So what we need to do is we need to pull this safety all the way up and around that. So you can see right here, it's actually got a little groove in here. We're going to pull this safety up to the point where it's not in that groove anymore. And that actually is going to release this pin. So that's locking that pin in place when that's shut. Now we can just go ahead and pull that side safety off. Set that aside with the other one. Now with those out, our grip safety should pop right out the back. Let's go ahead and set that to the side as well. So next up, let's go ahead and pull this pin right here. This is going to be our hammer pin, and that'll just slide right out. Just checking to see if we've got a little bit of grit on there. We do. Let's go ahead and we'll polish this up just a little bit before we put it back in. Now with that out, we should be able to just pull the hammer right out the back, and there's our stock hammer. So we'll go ahead and set this to the side. Then we have one final pin right here. This is that pin that was holding the right side safety in. Should be able to go ahead and push that out. And when I get that out, here's that pin. Sit that next to my hammer pin, and when I pull my punch out now, all of my internal components are going to come falling out. Okay? Maybe. Should be. There's one. There it is. And there's our stock sear and disconnector right there. Okay, so let's go ahead and put those to the side. To get the magazine release out, we're going to push it out just a little bit, just like that. And as we push out, we're going to put our screwdriver in here. This is just a flathead screwdriver. Put a little bit of sideways pressure on it, and it should, when it's ready, should turn about 90 degrees, which is going to lock that spring, and it's going to come right out the side. With that out, now all we got to do is tip backwards, and there is our trigger bar. And that is one wholly disassembled Tac Ultra frame. So now we have the opportunity to go ahead and put stuff back together. So first up, we've got from Fusion Firearms our flat face K trigger. So let's go ahead and see how well this fits in here. And that fits pretty good. We're not going to have to do any shaping. It is a little bit loose, but that's okay. And there's our K trigger. So we're going to go ahead and leave that in there. So one hint with your triggers here, go ahead and put in your trigger. Get it all seated in there, nice like that. Then go ahead and grab a magazine and put a magazine up into the magwell. And with the magazine in the magwell, make sure that you don't bind on your magazine. This is one spot where you can save yourself a lot of harm later on if you just go ahead and take care of this part now and make sure that you have the clearance that you need. So it's not binding on the magazine at all. Let's go ahead and set that aside. And now let's put our safety back in. So to put our safety back in, we're just going to put it right back in from the same side we took it out of. We're going to push it out a little bit. We're going to go ahead and move this the other direction. There we go. That's our spot. And then there it goes. You turn it until it clicks. That puts that magazine release back in the gun, and that locks our trigger in. So next up, we are to our hammer parts here. So let's go ahead and get this thing opened up. Let's take a look at what we've got. So we've got a new sear, a new disconnector, a new leaf spring, a new mainspring, and a new hammer. Right now what we want are the new sear and the new disconnector. Dang it. Just come out. Okay, so here's our new sear and our new disconnector. With the gun oriented like it is right here, the sear and the disconnector are going to sit somewhat like this. So you've got the sear facing this way, and the disconnector is going to kind of sit there. They're going to share these holes with the disconnector's kind of elongated hole here and the main hole here. Because this is a Series 70 and not a Series 80, we don't have to worry about all the the firing pin block crap, which is super nice. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do here, in this case, I'm actually going to clean up the sear a little bit. Now, not the sear faces or anything, it's just the sides are a little bit too tight on the frame, and the frame is kind of binding it a little bit. Just one of the things that kind of happens with 1911s. So we're going to go ahead and clean up this side and this side just a little bit to be able to smooth up our fit a little bit to make this trigger even nicer. So to do this, what I usually do is I grab my good old trusty block of aluminum here, a nice, very fine grit of sandpaper, and then I just kind of work on one side, then I'll go to work on the other side, just to take off just enough to clean up this fit. Okay, and you can see that I am taking some off because it's getting nice and polished. But again, it's not really the polish that I'm after here. It's actually the minor variance in clearance. Because again, this Tac Ultra frame is just a little bit tight on the sides here. Now, we don't want to go so far as to make it rattle, but we do want it smooth. And that's the key here. Okay, that's smoothed up our fit quite a bit. It's going in there a lot nicer now. So let's go ahead and get our disconnector and our trigger hooked together here. I'm going to take the disconnector, put it kind of through the front of the sear, line those two holes up. Now we got to get this in there. So in order to do this next part, we need about 3 hands, but we don't have 3 hands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the gun upside down. Now there is a hole right there that this has to go through while still keeping the sear in with the disconnector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this muzzle side down. I'm going to get our disconnector and sear hooked up like I need them, and we're going to just work this down and in. Once I get them kind of seated, I can go ahead and just push the disconnector up into that seat, make sure that my sear is mostly planted. Then I can take a punch, put a punch in from this side, work my sear around until I get its hole. There we go. Did have to pull up on the sear a little bit to be able to get that hole lined up. Now I've got my punch in all the way. You can see it's all the way over here. I can move things around and make sure that I got my disconnector and my sear, and I do. So now if I go ahead and sit it back down on this side, make sure I get my pin, very slowly pull my punch out, put my pin in, and there you can see that I've got my sear, my disconnector reinstalled. So far, so good. Okay, next up is the hammer. So we do need to replace our new hammer onto our old hammer spur. Now here's the thing, this is staked, so I'm not sure how this is going to go. We're going to go ahead and give it a shot. So first up, so let's get the gun out of the way for a second, and first up we need to go ahead and get this pin out. So to do that, I usually go back to my trusty aluminum block, because I can do a lot of harm with this aluminum block. Okay, next up I'm just going to grab this. This is just a starter punch. It looks terrible, but it does the job. Go ahead and put that down on there, and go ahead and give that some wax. We're driving through a couple of stakes here, so we do want to be a little bit careful. We do also want to be mindful of the orientation, so that's the orientation that these two parts are going to have when they are finished up. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and finish tapping that pin out. So there we've got our strut off. Got to get that pin the rest of the way out because I need it. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and set our hammer to the side, get our pin out of our block. There's our pin. There's our hammer. This is our new hammer. This is our old strut. So now we're going to go ahead and line those back up. See if we can pound this pin back in there. Let's go ahead and start with the side that we hammered through the last time. Not wanting to start very straight here. Come on. Get in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and clean this off just a little bit. Just grab a jeweler's file. What I need to do is I need to just take a little bit of the mushroom that was on the end of this thing off to make it a little bit easier to get down and through this hole. Both sides. Don't want a lot of it off, but I do need some of it off. Now let's give it a shot. I'm going to grab a pair of needle nose pliers to help with this as well, because I need to be able to hold it and tap it at the same time. That thing is just not happy about this, but do what we can. There we go. Much better. Okay. Now we can go ahead and get our strut in there. One good way to remember which side the strut flex is going to be on is that the flex is going to go down into the spine. You got to flex around to be able to get that spring down. Make sure that you're not going down too far before you get your, yep, see, I did it. Because you got to be able to get this thing in here, so there we go. Okay. Let's go ahead and tap this the rest of the way in. There we go. Let's grab a punch really quick. Just make sure we get that thing seated flush. And there we go. Now we've got our newly installed hammer. Alright, so now let's pull our gun back out. We've got our hammer all done. We do need to clean up our hammer pin a little bit. So with that, I'm just going to go back to my super fine paper. I think this is 2000 grit paper. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of a turn in this 2000 grit paper. Get any high spots off. Just give our hammer as much of a chance as it's got to ride on a nice, super smooth pin. Okay, so now that we've got that all back together, we can get our hammer back in. Let's go ahead and sit it back up here in its location. All we got to do is toss the pin in. There we go. Now our hammer is in. We've got our pin in there. All right, so now that we've got our hammer in, we can go ahead and put our leaf spring back in. So to get our leaf spring back in, what we want to do is we actually want to pull the hammer strut out. I just used the leaf spring to do that. So let's pull the hammer strut out because that needs to be on the back end of the leaf spring. Next, this hook here is going to go up on the top of the trigger bow. And then we got a little nubby hook down here that's going to go into this slot. That's going to go into this slot in our frame. So if I take my leaf spring, I'm just going to fish this first one up over the hammer bow. Then I'm going to drop it into the frame. And there we go. So now we've got our leaf spring in. We've got it hooked in that groove in the back and then hooked up over the trigger bow. Next up, we can go ahead and drop our hammer bow back down. I'm going to leave the hammer in the up position. We can go ahead and get our grip safety back in. So with our grip safety back in, I'm going to hold this shut. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my safety back in. So to get the safety back in, the first one I'm going to put in is the right side safety. And the right side safety is going to go in through the same hole. Let me flip the gun over really quick. I'm going to hold on to this so it doesn't fall out. So I've got that on this side now. Now I need to stick this pin into this hole here, but we're going to leave the thumb safe up for now. That's going to hold in my grip safe while I show you this. So this right here is the pin that actually holds our right side grip safe in. Now this pin has a little notch in it. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it's got a little notch in it right here. And we do need to make sure that this notch is oriented to the side that the grip safety is on, because the grip safety then has this little section of channel right here that's going to fit down inside that notch. So with those two lined up, I can pull my grip safety down with a little bit of pressure and a little bit of wiggle. It should go ahead and pop right in there. So now that side is on. So now I can flip it over. I can go ahead and reinsert my safety detent. Remember, the short side is going to go towards the front. So I can reinsert my safety detent. Then I can go ahead and put the other safety on. So to put the other safety on, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this one up the majority of the way. Flip back over to this side, and I'm going to go ahead and put this back nub into this hole of this side safety. So those approximately lined up. Now I'm going to grab my screwdriver. I'm going to go in from the top, and I'm going to depress our detent while at the same time with my thumb pushing in on my safety, and with my back finger wiggling the right side safety so that everything gets lined up. Once I get that detent in, I can go ahead and pull my screwdriver out with a little bit of pressure, making sure everything is lined up. There's the click, and there's our safety. So now we are thus far. We are to the point of putting in the mainspring housing. However, the mainspring housing needs a little bit of work in itself because we've got a mainspring in here that needs replaced with the new mainspring from our kit. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we need to compress this ball with this spring and then push out this pin that sits right here. So again, sitting the gun to the side. So I'm going to use one punch to push this down. I'm going to use the other one to push the pin out, and the pin does go from the outside out through the inside. It's going to look something like this. Push down. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with showing you guys enough, but there's the... Oh. Okay, so there the cup is depressed. I'm going to push the pin. The pin is out. I'm going to go ahead and let loose. And now you can see our pin, our spring, and the cup. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the cup off. This spring is now trash. Let's grab our new spring, put our old cup on our new spring, put that whole thing back down in our assembly. Now I need to go the other direction. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and preset this spring in here. I'm going to flip it around just like that. This time I don't need that second punch, I just need this one. I'm going to push in and down, getting everything lined up, and as soon as I get down far enough, I can push this pin back in and reseat that spring. Alright, so now all that's together. Go ahead and bring the gun back out. Now with the hammer up, we want the hammer up because that's going to put as little pressure as we can on our mainspring housing here. We can go ahead and from the bottom slide the mainspring housing back up and in. I'm going to go ahead and back here, I'm going to pull out on the hammer just a little bit to be able to make sure that that hammer strut gets seated in our spring back there. Now with that all together, you should be able to feel a little bit of spring tension on the mainspring housing as you're pushing it in, as well as some spring tension on our hammer as we try to pull it back. Now it's magwell time. And I was slightly wrong. We are actually going to reuse our old pin here. So with our old pin and our new magwell, let's go ahead and sit our new magwell in. We're going to see how well that fits up. So that is going to be gigantic, but that's all right. That's kind of the goal. We do want this to go in from the right-hand side of the gun. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit everything together like this. And as I pinch, so first I need to remove this guy here. And I think I'm going to put him in from the other side. I think that's where it's supposed to be, because I believe this is a screw meant to be able to tighten everything together once it's all installed. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in from this side, making sure that it doesn't protrude out the top here. And next up, I'm going to go ahead and get everything kind of seated together. It's kind of a tight fit, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start our pin here. And the first thing I want to do is I want to kind of get it seated in my frame here. So let's get that at least centered up. Once I can get that lined up, I've got to get this pin in and start working my pin up through the frame of the firearm. Okay, so now we've got our magwell back on. So that pretty much sums everything up. At this point, let's go ahead and check for function. I'm going to go ahead and put my finger back here, pull the trigger, make sure that works. Okay, and it does. Make sure the safety works. Get it up all the way, and it does. And then make sure the grip safe works, and it does. All right, from here we can go ahead and put our grips back on. Get those screwed back in. If I can find my Allen wrench, get those back in. Let's go ahead and do the other side. All right, next up, let's go ahead and tighten our magwell screw. So this magwell screw here is going to go up and tight up against the gun to be able to keep our magwell in the proper orientation. It's a pretty long screw, so we're going to go ahead and get that in there and give it some torque. And it's going to keep that going forward like that. Now all we got to do is get our slide back on, and we can play with this thing a little bit. All right, and there we go. That is now our new Tac Ultra. Oof. With a very nice setup. Now, pair this with these Taylor Freelance base pads that we got that are going to be in an upcoming video. And ooh my goodness, would you look at that. That is our STI killer. So that's it for this time, guys. The installation of the Fusion Firearms trigger, the Evolution Gunworks trigger kit, and the Taylor Freelance magwell on our Rock Island Tac Ultra. Now this thing is ready to take on the competition in this year's USPSA. If you're interested in how this thing does, go ahead and hit that notification bell down below to follow along with our USPSA vlogs when the season starts back up. If you like what we do here on the channel and you want to help out a little bit, head on over to our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/workthetrigger. Remember, guys, I appreciate every one of you, and until next time, do your research, get informed, and get to work.